pleasure for me to be here, and I really thanks Augusto for this invitation. And I also accept the challenge of this title. And with the last slide, you will understand why. Because we shared a very interesting sampling season together. And one of our aim was just to try to understand what some larvae living in extreme habitats, such as glacial habitats, eat. We are talking about freshwater animals, so like fish out of the water in some way, because we moved from soil to water. And we are talking about non-biting niches, Diptera chironomide. Chironomids are insects, dipterans, and they represent the freshwater insect family that comprises the highest number of species. Up to date, 6,600 species have been described worldwide. They are cosmopolitan, so we found them in all zoogeographical regions. And we have also one species, the only holometabolous insect living in Antarctica, for example. So they are really everywhere. So these are chironomids. So you see in these pictures the larvae, the pupa, the adults, and here the eggs. And these are the information just to present this invertebrate taxon. And this is the third one. So they exhibit a wide variety of ecological preferences. So they are powerful bioindicators, but mainly due to difficulties in just taxonomic difficulties. So in identifying them specifically at species level as a larvae, they are often neglected in biomonitoring programs of freshwater ecosystems requiring species level, of course. And we are only 550 chironomid workers in the world. So they play a very important ecological role in all freshwaters. But anyway, there are not so much studies just due to these difficulties to identify species. They are dominant within freshwater benthic macroinvertebrates. Here they are. This is a larvae of chironomids, and all the others are other representative of benthic macroinvertebrates common in different lentic and lotic alpine freshwaters. Chironomids represent from 90 to 100% of the benthic communities in glacier-fed streams, so streams fed by ice melt and snow melt. Here we are, depending on the maximum water temperature, and of course the distance from the glacier and the glacial front, we classify the different habitats in eucrial. Eucrial, here we are on the glacier. These habitats are called as bediers. Or metacrial, just in front of the glacier, so we are at the source of the river. And within 1 or 2, maximum 2 kilometers downstream from the front, so the hypocrial. As you can see, moving from the water on the glacier to 1-2 kilometers downstream of the front, we have an increasing in water temperature, but from 0 to 4 centigrade. This is the maximum temperature around the world. So the year, during the year, we have only 2 months of summers, July and August, and this is the maximum water temperature. And for the rest of the year, temperature is around 0, and these habitats are completely frozen even in the substrates. So as obviously, we have a decreasing harshness of the environment, specifically increasing water temperature, but also increasing food availability, and so ameliorated conditions just moving down downstream from the glacier and the glacier front. These habitats that we call all together as a CRIAL represent extreme habitats for lives. I thank Andrea for his beautiful introduction to what is the meaning of extreme habitats. This is one example. So, a harsh environment is de facto a setting in which survival is difficult or impossible for most organisms. Of course, not for all of them, because we saw that some of them conquest these environments. This harshness is due mainly to, as we already told, very low water temperature with maximum values lower than 4 centigrade degrees. And just in the river, not just on the glacier, high discharge in summer with a highly daily excursion. So discharge can increase in the afternoon by 5 to 10 times in respect to the morning. High channel and substrate instability, high turbidity. So the color of the water is white, gray, just due to the rock flour originated from the glacier. And of course, due to these conditions, we have low primary production. Due to this plethora of extreme conditions, of course, we expected to have low biodiversity. And in regards of animals, a simplified macroinvertebrate community that in European glacial freshwaters is dominated by only one genus of chironomids, is the genus Diamesa, with different species. This is the community, the typical community that we can find just in the first meters downstream of a glacier, so in the so-called metacreal and even in the hypocreal. We see the only one insect taxon, chironomids, belonging to different species of the same genus, Diamesa. And we can find some crustaceans, mainly arpacticoids, nematodes, and nematodes living here are mainly parasites of chironomids. So it's really hard life here, not only due to low temperature and low food availability, but also to the presence of parasites even here. A few oligochaetes, and that's all. This is the community living here. And if we move on the glacier, so in the cryoconites or in the bediers, the situation is not so different. So we have in the water only chironomids, and here we have generally only one, maximum two species. The species that we can find is the so-called ice fly, Diamesa steinböcki, that is really at risk of extinction today due to climate change, so due to greenhouse effect, increasing air, and as a consequence, of course, also water temperature. And this is due, of course, to the glacier retreating. So the habitat is really changing. And so no more hospital for these highly specialized species living here. And the predators here are represented only by spiders and carabids, coleopteran, moving just on the debris present on the glacier. But why they are obligate glacial stream taxa? These Diamesa species are living only here. Some of them are living only here, like Diamesa steinböcki. Others live also in the glacier-fed streams, more downstream, so in the so-called glacial-equal sectors, even at 1, 2, or 3 kilometers downstream from the glacier. In a more structured community, so with other chironomid species belonging to different families and also with other insects. We investigated in the last 2 decades deeply the cold resistance of these species. Of course, here very few summarized results regarding the morphological adaptation. Of course, they have to face high UV And so melanism is just a protection against the UV radiation. But melanism has also a strong thermoregulation function. So these larvae are black or dark brown. Or the brachyptery and daptery, just because offer a resistance to wind. The mating is on the ground, and so they don't form a swarm in the air, and so on and so on. So many information on the morphological adaptation, and many information on the physiological adaptation. Just to cold, we demonstrated that the species are freeze intolerant, just like the species living in the Antarctica. And this is due mainly to the accumulation of glucose and sucrose. So in some way, they are diabetic larvae, very sweet. They have also the antifreeze proteins, the same that we can find in Atlantic fish. And they have a high fluidity of the cell membranes due to the presence of a specific lipid composition. So the polyunsaturated fatty acids, they are rich in omega-3, for example, so they are sweet and also very nutritional, with a high nutritional value, for example. And so we investigated using different techniques, different methods, the physiological and biochemical adaptation to cold. Here we have the larvae alive. I don't know if you had in your life this experience. Most of people doesn't like these animals because they are black, because they seem warm. Of course, I have a passion for them because I spent 20 years of my career just to study their physiology, just fascinated by extreme habitats and extremophilous species. As you can see in this mini video, they eat detritus. This is detritus. And in the detritus, you can see some mineral particles that we found even in the gut of these larvae. They are considered all chironomids belonging to the genus Diamesa, but generally to the subfamily Diamesinae, are considered detritus feeders. These detritus can be alloctonous, as is, for example, on the glacier, or autochthonous, and grazers. They eat, if they are present, diatoms, but also chrysophytes, cyanobacteria, and cyanophytes. And when present even Aetrurus fetidus, that is a chrysophyta very common in cold running waters. Not only in glacier-fed streams in summer, but also in cold springs. Several studies carried out mainly using the technique of stable isotopes demonstrated that these larvae of Diamesa in glacier-fed streams prefer to eat Hydrurus fetidus. Hydrurus fetidus is also in some way their house. So it's like to say they eat their house, because it represents a protective habitat against discharge, and also the turbidity due to the rocks present in the water. According to other studies, they eat when they are, of course, diatoms that grow on Hydrurus fetidus thalli, because they have a highly nutritional value respected to other algae due to the polyunsaturated fatty acids. Really, it's not known whether larvae living in harsh environments, this is in general, can choose the most nutrition food sources or must feed on anything they can get. We have some evidence that these larvae finally are, yes, grazers, detritivores, but generally omnivores, because not just Diamesa, but other larvae living in proglacial ponds, known to be strictly detritivorous, had capsules of other larvae, chironomid larvae in the gut. So finally, they are predators. So we can suggest that in harsh environments, they become omnivorous. And we also agree that generally they prefer the most abundant algal taxa as food source. And so when we study the diet of these species, we have to consider, of course, the percentage of the different primary producers present in the community. We also did isotopic analysis on chironomids and other invertebrates, investigating the diet of these animals. And we demonstrated as well that when the Hydrurus fetidus is present, they prefer Hydrurus fetidus than other algae. But in crial habitats without Hydrurus fetidus, they eat what they found. So only mineral material and alloctonous material, like pollen delivered by aeolic inputs to the glacier. And of course, moving to ameliorated conditions in terms of food availability, when they found diatoms, they prefer diatoms in respect to other algae. We were really impressed by the high levels of fine glacial rock fragments present in the gut of the larvae, collected just on glaciers and in the first meters downstream of the glacier front. You see, this is the section of the gut content of this larvae of Diamesa zerni species. You see the minerals in the gut. So this is the case of one larvae collected in Hydrurus fetidus, but we were surprised that we found in several larvae only one cell, probably of a Chrysophyta, but only one, and nothing else. So the macroscopic analysis of the gut content didn't confirm that de facto this species preferred Hydrurus fetidus when it is present in respect to other algae, here represented by mainly some chlorococcales and a few algal green algae. When Hydrurus fetidus is present in the gut, is evident, really well evident. This is the case of another individuals of the same species collected in a cold spring rich in cells of Hydrurus fetidus. So we are not convinced about the use of Hydrurus fetidus as a food or only as a refuge for this algae. And here the last consideration, reminding just what I said at the beginning of my presentation. So the interesting topic on what they eat. Can they eat minerals? Because the gut is full of these mineral particles. And this fascinated also Andrea and Augusto, and we started to study the gut content, of course, in a different, using a different techniques, just to try to understand which bacteria or even fungi are present in the gut of these animals and how they can survive in such extreme habitats where primary producers are so rare. And I thank you for your attention, just with a tribute to Andrea. and also Augusto and Roberto. I don't know if Roberto is attending the meeting today, just collecting on the glaciers several organisms, tardigrades, and soils, detritus, ice, and so on. The study is ongoing, so we don't have finally other results specifically on chironomids, but probably if Andrea, you have news about these results, you can add something. But just for the moment, we have interesting results about the abundance of bacteria in terms of species and really abundance, and the fungi in different abiotic matrices, and we are waiting for the results regarding chironomids. Thank you for your attention.